In Hungary, deteriorating relationships seen behind Biden's Democracy Summit snub. Ahead of U.S. President Joe Biden's Summit for Democracy this week, word trickled out that Hungary was the only EU member state without an invite. Again, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and his cohorts thus find themselves on the outside looking in on one of the White House's signature events, conceived as a bulwark to advance democratic principles in the United States and abroad and to counter creeping authoritarianism around the world. Leaders from 121 countries were invited to the mixed virtual and in-person summit in Washington and 4 other cities across 4 continents on March 28 to 30th. Nate Kahlo, a foreign policy analyst and advisor to the European Parliament, says Hungary's absence reflects a response to a relationship that appears to be going from bad to worse at a crucial juncture in Europe. Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has prompted the international community increasingly to view events and actions through the lens of the war's catastrophic effects and ongoing risks. But despite Hungary's NATO membership and its strong economic ties with the United States, Kahlo told RFE/RL's Hungarian service that certain political factors, Putinization, anti-democratic tendencies, and the bucking of the cornerstones of Western federalist systems, are deteriorating the relationship. The summit comes against a backdrop of nearly 13 years in which detractors say Orbán and his ruling Fidesz party have used their supermajority in parliament to consolidate control of Hungarian institutions, neuter independent media and civil society, and, more recently, undermine Western deterrence in the face of Russian aggression. Biden made a summit for democracy a priority in his first year in office. But the singling out for exclusion of Orbán's Hungary alone among EU member states was part of that push even before Biden's inauguration in January 2021. In 2019, as a presidential candidate, Biden cited the rapid advance of authoritarianism, nationalism, and illiberal tendencies around the world, not just in Russia and China, but also among our allies, places like Turkey, the Philippines, Hungary. After Hungary was not invited to the first Summit for Democracy in December 2021, Budapest responded by blocking the European Union's formal participation in the event. On the one hand, Orbán was not even invited to the first Democracy Summit, Kahlo said. Not only has the Hungarian government's perception in Washington not improved since then, it has even worsened. Kahlo said this is unsurprising, given Orbán's ongoing resistance to EU and NATO efforts to help Ukraine fight back against Putin's invasion. The Hungarian Prime Minister has repeatedly called for the lifting of EU sanctions against Russia imposed over its war in Ukraine. But the analyst also cited Budapest's foot-dragging over Finnish and Swedish entry to NATO, which he suggested was perceived as being directed against the protection of democracy. The Hungarian government's policy of blocking Ukrainian participation in some NATO meetings further soured relations with the Biden administration, Kahlo said, adding that it was a new kind of relationship between Washington and Budapest, since there was no example before of allies showing hostile behavior. Appalled again. Bilateral relations took a hit again this month, when the U.S. State Department issued its annual human rights assessments. On Hungary, it cited consecutive states of emergency and the US's description of April 2022 national elections as lacking a level playing field. It also alleged interference with the judiciary, political corruption and intimidation, and threats against racial and sexual minorities. In response, during a visit to Bosnia-Herzegovina, Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said on March 22 he was appalled again and again every year that the United States has the temerity to issue such excoriating statements about the internal issues and situations about the internal affairs of other countries. In photos, thousands of students and other opponents of Orbán's administration took part in an anti-government march in Budapest on March 15 calling for educational reforms and a change in the Central European country's political culture. Szijjártó added that the State Department should not interfere with our domestic politics, especially not based on biased, one-sided information. U.S. Ambassador to Hungary David Pressman, a human rights lawyer who was reportedly mocked by Orban as a pressman, instead of a good friend after his appointment, responded to Sejardo's rhetorical question, "How do they come up with this?" Pressman said simply, "Facts. Evidence." Pressman later likened Sejardo's response to Kremlin pronouncements, saying such a rejection of Western criticism of a country's human rights record sounds familiar. It was a very public rebuke of Budapest just weeks after Pressman met in Washington with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and senior White House officials to discuss recent developments in the relationship with our ally, including uniquely anti-American rhetoric from senior Hungarian officials and pervasive anti-American rhetoric in the media controlled by the government of Hungary, according to an embassy statement. Pressman emerged from that meeting to say that Hungary has reached an important moment in determining its future path, before adding pointedly, as Russia's unjustifiable war rages next, "Listening to the end and I hope it's useful. Listening to the end and I hope it's useful."